When an unusual blood smear and a discarded knife threaten the peace of Nero Wolfe's kitchen, the stakes are higher than any culinary disaster. As Wolfe uncovers a deeper conspiracy, an unexpected danger looms over the household. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Be sure to subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the day Fritz nearly died. I caught the first whiff of trouble before I even stepped into the kitchen, an odd metallic scent that didn't belong in any room Fritz Brenner ever laid claim to. Normally, the kitchen at Wolfe's Brownstone smelled like something out of a Swiss fairy tale. Butter, herbs, and enough simmering patience to turn a block of ice into consommé. But that night, crossing from the hallway into the glow of Fritz's sanctuary, I felt the air twitch against my skin, and the second I saw him, on his knees bowing toward the tiles like a man trying to keep from collapsing, I knew the universe had decided to toy with us. Fritz wasn't the kneeling type. He didn't grovel before food, much less the kitchen floor. But there he was, both hands planted on the tiles, staring at something he'd never intended to see in that room, a thin smear of blood not his own. Beside it, a chef's knife protruded from the grout, like Excalibur gone rogue. And if you know anything about Fritz, you know he treats his knives the way Wolfe treats his orchids. Untouchable perfection. Seeing one abandoned on the floor was like spotting a unicorn asleep in the bathtub. "Fritz," I said quietly, stepping forward, "if this is some new cooking method, I'm not sure I approve." His head jerked up, and I caught the pale terror in his eyes. Not fear for himself, fear of what this meant. His voice rasped, the Swiss lilt trembling. "Archie, I didn't see the face." That did it. I was beside him in 2 steps, one hand gripping his arm, the other hovering near the knife without touching it. I guided him backward until he bumped gently into the edge of the table. He let me help him into a chair, something he'd ordinarily swat my hand away for. His breathing fluttered. His gaze flicked back to the knife every few seconds like he expected it to leap up and finish the job. The smear of blood was small, too small to have belonged to Fritz, and there was no body hiding behind the stove or folded neatly inside the pantry. The door off the kitchen that led to the back hall was still locked from the inside. No broken window, no footprints, just a silent menace lingering in a room that should never know the scent of violence. I checked the clock above the pantry, 7:03 p.m. Fritz should have been serenading a saucepan, not auditioning for the role of shaken cook number 1. "Talk," I said gently. "Tell me what happened." He shook his head, shoulders shuddering. Someone was behind me." I turned. There was a shadow, no, a presence. I heard my name, and then... He gestured helplessly toward the blood and the knife. "I cannot remember." The worst part? He wasn't exaggerating. Fritz never lied unless it was to spare Wolfe a coronary or to hide a failed soufflé. This was the real article. Before I could press him further, the office door thundered open, and Nero Wolfe himself materialized in the doorway. Calling Wolfe's arrival fast would be a lie, nothing that large moves fast, but he made good time considering. His face was what gave him away, expressions smooth to marble, only the slash of his mouth betraying emotion. "What," he demanded, "is this?" I straightened. Someone paid Fritz a visit, an unfriendly one. He moved just far enough into the kitchen to take in the scene without stepping too close. Wolfe despises the kitchen, not for the cooking, but for the spatial insult it poses to his dignity. Still, his eyes flicked from Fritz to the knife to the blood, and the temperature of the room plummeted. "Pfui," he breathed. Not irritation, not contempt, but a buried quake of fear. Then louder, "Archie, secure the doors. Nobody enters without your eye upon them." If Wolfe had handed me a newborn elephant and asked me to raise it on ginger ale, he couldn't have surprised me more. He never issued security orders unless he believed the threat was personal, and if someone had laid a hand, or knife, on Fritz, it was personal. I moved quickly, checking the back hall door, the dining room entry, and the stairwell. Everything was locked, undisturbed. Whoever had gotten in had also gotten out in a way I didn't like one bit. Behind me, Wolfe addressed Fritz with an unexpected softness. "You are injured?" Fritz shook his head, ashamed. "No, sir. The blood is not mine." "That," Wolfe said darkly, "is worse." Before any of us could add sense to the situation, the phone rang in the office. Wolfe barked, "Archie!" which told me he didn't want to leave Fritz's sight. I jogged into the office and picked up. "Nero Wolfe?" came the gravel-toned voice of Inspector Kramer. "This the famous Cook's Palace?" "Good evening to you too, Inspector. What's on the stove?" "Is Wolfe calling in an assault or a homicide?" Kramer demanded. No shouting, just bone-weary pragmatism. "A near assault," I said. "No corpse, but we've got blood, a knife, and Fritz in need of smelling salts." "Is this another of Wolfe's?" He stopped himself. "All right. Tell him I'll give him discretion. Medical grade, for now." That was as close to a warm handshake as Kramer ever got. I returned to the kitchen, relaying the message. Wolfe gave a curt nod. "Very well." He studied the blood on the tiles. "Archie, describe the amount." "Dime-size smear. A drop or two more leading to the table leg." "Not enough for a fatal wound," he muttered. Fritz lifted a trembling hand, and something white protruded from his fist. I knelt beside him. "Easy. What's that?" He opened his palm, slowly. Inside was a torn label, thick paper, expensive ink, bearing the insignia of Les Six Tables, a gourmet supplier that dealt in ingredients so rare they made diamonds look common. I'd only heard of them because a critic once bragged that their peppercorns tasted like the memory of a kiss. That should tell you the type. Fritz stared at it, baffled. "I do not remember taking this." Wolfe leaned in, his bulk casting a shadow over the table. "Archie, bring that here, carefully." I set the label on a clean towel and carried it into the office. Wolfe followed just to the threshold, not one step further. His voice lost its usual languor. "This," he pronounced, fingers curling, "is intolerable." "Someone wanted to make a point," I said. "And they made it in your kitchen." His eyes sharpened. "Fritz is not merely my chef. He is indispensable." He stopped himself, throat tightening around the word. Wolfe expressing affection is like an eclipse, rare, startling, and liable to blind you if you stare too long. I nodded. "Then we'd better find the joker who tried to carve him." He glared at the blood again. "This was not carving." "No?" I asked. Wolfe shook his head. "This was aborted, interrupted. The knife was not thrown or wielded in haste. It fell. He stumbled. The assailant fled." "How do you know?" "I do not know," he growled. "I deduce. Do not force me to repeat myself." I gave him a thin smile. Wouldn't dream of it. The kitchen felt smaller with Wolfe in it, his bulk filling the doorway, his presence dwarfing even the stove. He studied Fritz, who sat pale and exhausted. For a moment, Wolfe said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly. "This is deliberate, calculated, an intrusion into my house." He turned to me. "We will respond accordingly." I lifted the label. "Recognize this brand?" His nostrils flared. "I have encountered their pretentious catalogues, Les Six Tables. Their pompous commitment to culinary purity is an offense to language, intellect, and digestion." "Then maybe they're involved." "Perhaps." Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. "Archie, this is war." "On who?" "That," he rumbled, "we shall ascertain." A soft noise made us turn. Fritz rose unsteadily. "Sir, I am sorry." Wolfe snapped. "You will not apologize for being attacked, Fritz. Sit." Fritz sat so quickly the chair squeaked. I kept one eye on the blood smear and one on the entrance hall. Whoever came in knew the layout, knew Fritz's routine. Wolfe nodded grimly, and knew I would not be in the kitchen before dinner. The timing was intentional. "Which means," I said, "they weren't after you." He met my eyes, something steely and paternal glinting there. "No, they were after him, or something he has, or something they believe he knows." I lifted the torn label, starting with this. Wolfe's jaw tightened. "We begin tonight. Lock the house, no visitors, and fetch paper and pen. I must dictate." "Dictate what?" "Our response." He reached for the bell cord, then stopped. Instead, he lowered his hand. "Not yet. Fritz must eat." "Fritz," his voice softened. "Are you able to prepare something simple?" Fritz nodded shakily. "Yes, sir." "Good." Wolfe stepped back. "Then we shall adhere to routine. Routine is armor." I had to grin, and here I thought I was the only one in danger tonight. Wolfe shot me a glare that could have wilted an orchid. "Archie, enough." "Yes, sir." But under all that thunder, I heard it. The worry, for Fritz, and reluctantly for me. This wasn't just an assault. This was a declaration, and Wolfe never ignored those. If there's one thing the brownstone never prepared me for, it was the sight of Fritz Brenner walking like an old man after a beating. He wasn't injured, not physically, but the shock had gotten into his bones, and guiding him up the stairs felt like escorting a violin back into its case after someone had tried to smash it. When Fritz's hands trembled, the whole household trembled with him. Even Wolfe, though he'd rather swallow a dictionary sideways than admit it. The hallway lights were low, and the shadows crawled along the banister, giving the whole place the feel of a quiet church where something unholy had happened in the front pew. "Steady," I murmured, keeping a hand under Fritz's elbow. "I don't want you falling and Wolfe accusing me of manslaughter by staircase." Fritz gave a weak snort. It wasn't much, but it was better than the silence he'd been offering. His room was at the end of the upstairs hall, neatly kept, curtains closed, bed made tight enough to bounce a dime. I got him inside, helped him sit, and made sure he had water. He didn't drink it, just held the glass like he wasn't sure what liquid did anymore. "You want to talk?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "Archie, I have no enemies." "That's what they all say before someone tries to redecorate them," I said, pulling a notepad from my pocket. "We're going to do this my way. I'll list every person you've worked with, cooked for, insulted by refusing their request for paprika or turned down for a recipe. Someone knew you'd be in the kitchen at that exact minute. Someone knew your name." He shivered. "The voice." "Yeah," I said, sitting on the edge of the dresser. "Tell me again." "It was precise," he whispered. "Soft. Not a thief, not a brute. Someone who knew me, someone who said my name as if—" His throat tightened. "As if I belonged to them." I hated the chill that crawled up my spine. Not fear, fury. The kind Wolfe would never admit to feeling, but had in abundance. "Right," I said. "We'll get to the bottom of this. For now, lie back, breathe, and don't worry about anything except being alive. That's enough for tonight." I left him resting and headed downstairs to the office. Wolfe was already there, planted behind his desk, like a storm cloud in a chair, fingers steepled, refusing even the consolation of beer, though the hour was begging for it. That alone told me the situation had sunk its teeth deep. I escorted him up, I said. "He's shaken, more than he wants to admit." Wolfe's eyelids lowered halfway. "Of course he is." "I'm starting a list," I said, lifting the pad. "Every critic, rival, gourmand, culinary aristocrat." "Pfui," Wolfe growled. "You cannot catalogue ignorance, nor envy, nor malice." "Sure I can. I've been doing it since I met you." His head snapped up. "Archie." "Sir." "Do not trifle." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said with a grin I didn't entirely feel. "But if Fritz says he has no enemies, we'll have to borrow some from your collection." Wolfe tugged the bell cord once, pure reflex when he didn't know what else to do with his hands. Moments later, Fritz appeared in the doorway. It wasn't time for food, so his presence was enough to make Wolfe flinch. Fritz cleared his throat. "Sir, Inspector Kramer is here." Wolfe shut his eyes in a slow, agonized blink. "Archie, retrieve him." I stepped into the hall. Kramer was waiting, hat in hand, jaw grinding slowly like he was trying to chew the whole case into submission. What struck me most wasn't his impatience. It was the fact that he'd knocked, politely. Kramer didn't knock politely unless he was worried the walls might collapse. "Evening, Inspector," I said. "You look like a man resisting the urge to bite through a cigar." He grunted. "I didn't smoke in the kitchen earlier, out of respect." That explained the tension. Kramer without a lit cigar was like a tiger without claws. "Where's Wolfe?" "In the office." He followed me in. Wolfe didn't stand. He wouldn't if the president walked in, but he did incline his head, which for Wolfe was equal to sending a man flowers. "Inspector." "Wolfe," Kramer replied, closing the door behind him. "I need straight answers." "You shall have them as they become clear," Wolfe said. "At present, we have blood with no corpse, an intruder with no face, and a motive concealed." Kramer's nostrils flared. "You understand what this looks like? Blood in this house means I need to file a report, but without a body I get nothing but trouble upstairs." "Your trouble," Wolfe said pointedly, "is shared." "For once," Kramer admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I'll give you 24 hours. Keep it quiet, no press, no noise. But after that, the DA's office breathes down my throat. That is acceptable, Wolfe said. I blinked. Wolfe accepting something without theatrics was rarer than a snowstorm in August. Kramer scanned the room, his eyes landing briefly on my notepad. What's that? A list, I said. Fritz's past associates, food world enemies, snobs, critics, anyone who might want to season him permanently. Kramer stared. He actually doesn't have enemies. That, I said, is part of the problem. Kramer stepped closer to Wolfe's desk. About that label you mentioned earlier, Les Six Tables. Ever heard of them? The corner of Wolfe's mouth curled like he'd tasted rotten vinegar. Unfortunately. I did some checking after your call, Kramer said. They're a gourmet society, exclusive, secretive, a little too high on their own aroma. Wolfe muttered, Pfui. The manifesto they published last year, I said, flipping open my notes, reads like a war cry against anyone who uses impure ingredients. They believe cuisine is a moral hierarchy. Kramer gave me a sharp stare. You think this is connected? It's not a knitting club, Inspector, I said. And the label Fritz grabbed wasn't an accident. Grabbed? Kramer's eyebrows rose. He remembers that? I shook my head. No, that's what worries us. He doesn't recall touching anything. Wolfe leaned forward, voice low. Inspector, someone entered my kitchen, addressed my chef by name, and attempted to do him harm. That is not a burglary. It is a warning. Kramer didn't argue. He looked tired, bone-tired. Fine, but I'm telling you now, Wolfe, if this blows up, the press will crucify you. That, Wolfe said coolly, has happened before. But you'll get no favors from me unless you cooperate. Wolfe inclined his head. I shall. Kramer studied him for a long second. Then, almost grudgingly, he said, All right, I'll wait for your report. I nearly applauded. Kramer doesn't hand out respect like candy. He left without slamming the door. Progress. I turned back to Wolfe, arms folded. Well, if he's being polite, it means the world is ending. Wolfe exhaled slowly. Archie, your vigilance must be absolute. That got me. He didn't bark it, didn't lace it with sarcasm, just said it. The closest Wolfe would ever get to saying he was counting on me. Always is, I said lightly. You know me, a regular watchdog, without the fleas. Wolfe gave me a glower that could have powered the city grid. Sit, we must reconstruct the sequence. I sat. We went through everything Fritz had said, every detail of the kitchen, every possible approach an intruder might have taken. The more we examined, the clearer it became that this wasn't random, or sloppy, or hurried. Someone had been calm enough to speak, calm enough to reach for Fritz, and quiet enough to slip away without leaving more than a drop or two of blood. The clock ticked past 8:30. Fritz didn't bring dinner. Wolfe didn't ask for it. That alone told me we were in new territory. Wolfe broke the silence. Fritz mentioned the voice again. Soft, I said. Precise. Personal. Wolfe's nostrils narrowed. Not a thief. No, he grunted. We are under siege. Feels like it. Very well. He pushed back from the desk. I must think. Do not leave the house without informing me. Me? Leave? I'm glued to this place until we find who wants to turn the kitchen into a fun house. He waved dismissively. Archie, enough. I stood. If you need me, holler. I do not holler. Sure you don't. He shot me a look so withering it could have wilted Theodore's orchids. He reached for the bell cord, then paused. Tonight wasn't for routine. Tonight was for war. I turned toward the hall, hand on the doorknob. Behind me, Wolfe spoke again, voice low. Archie. Yeah? Be cautious. That was Wolfe speak, for I'd rather you didn't get killed tonight. I gave him a grin. Always am. And the brownstone settled into silence, the type that means something terrible has begun and something worse is coming. The sidewalks of Manhattan had the kind of shine that only comes after a light rain and a heavier dose of human vanity, and I was marching across them with a purpose Wolfe would have disapproved of on principle. The city's steam vents were doing their nightly impression of angry dragons, and every second cabbie seemed to be leaning on their horn like it was paying them by the note. If you ask me, It was the perfect backdrop for strolling into a world of culinary lunatics who thought peppercorns were political statements. My target was Les Six Tables, a gourmet society so exclusive they made country clubs look like public playgrounds. And since someone had tried to turn Fritz into an hors d'oeuvre, they had climbed to the very top of my personal Christmas list. The first restaurant on my route stood like a jewelled box on Madison Avenue, all brass and velvet. The maitre d' took one look at me and seemed to run a silent algorithm that concluded I was insufficiently French to be tolerated, so he gave me a sniff sharp enough to cut glass. I flashed my brightest smile. "Relax, pal. I'm not here to downgrade your decor. Though, between us, that purple wallpaper is a hate crime." He stiffened. "Sir, our establishment does not—" "Spare me," I said, stepping past him before he could summon the velvet rope cavalry. "I'm looking for someone who knows about Les Six Tables." That did the trick. His eyelids fluttered like he'd been slapped with a lemon peel. "I cannot discuss." "Sure you can," I said. "It's easy. You form words, push them out, and if you get tired, I can fetch you some water." A voice behind him cut in. "Monsieur Goodwin? This way." A chef in a white coat approached, arms thick as rolling pins, and a face that belonged on a Mount Rushmore dedicated to kitchen disasters. He led me through swinging doors into the back kitchen, which smelled like garlic, ambition, and professional jealousy. Pots clattered, water hissed, and cooks darted like caffeinated weasels. The chef turned to me. "You seek information. You will be disappointed." "That's my natural state," I said. "Tell me about the member who got kicked out." He wiped his hands and lowered his voice. "She stole a recipe. That is what they say." "They who?" "The inner circle. They decide everything." "And what's the punishment for recipe theft these days?" I asked. "Stocks, hanging, public humiliation by overcooked risotto?" He didn't laugh, not even a twitch. That alone was suspicious. "She vanished," he whispered. "We do not speak of it." "Vanished," I repeated. "Convenient." His eyes darted around. "You must go. Now." When a chef with forearms like battering rams tells you to leave, you typically leave. But I wasn't done yet. I ducked back into the dining room where the maitre d' watched me like I was an unlicensed fire hazard. "Ever hear of Fritz Brenner?" I asked casually. He blinked. "Of course, the chef of Mr. Wolfe." "And did your club ever approach him?" "I wouldn't know," he said too quickly. A lousy liar, but a liar nonetheless. My next stop was a dingy alley kitchen behind a different upscale joint, the kind where the glamour stops the moment you exit the front door. Steam curled around my legs like a hungry cat, and a sous chef leaned against the bricks smoking with the air of a man who'd given up trying to care about anything except nicotine. "Les Six Tables," he said, exhaling. "Don't ask me. They don't like questions." "That's funny," I said, "because I love questions. And answers. Especially answers." He flicked ash. "All I know is someone got purged. A historian. She knew too much." "About what?" He shrugged. "Smuggling? Fraud? Or maybe she just put nutmeg in the wrong dish. Those people are nuts." "Any idea where she is now?" "Sure," he said. "Mars." "Meaning?" "She vanished." 2 vanishings in one night was too many for coincidence, not enough for satisfaction. I moved on. The third informant was a critic with a face like a wilted tulip, and the ego of a man who believed the world owed him applause for inventing adjectives. His office was in a cramped midtown building where the elevator threatened to cough up its last breath. "I won't speak of Les Six Tables," he said, lighting a cigarette with the flair of a magician. "They blacklisted me once for suggesting their foie gras lacked moral depth." "Did it?" I asked. "Of course not, but the metaphor amused me." "Tell me about the expelled member." He stiffened. "I cannot." "Because you won't," I said, "or because you're scared." He tapped ash into a porcelain dish shaped like a duck. "Both." "You think she was harmed?" "I think," he said, "that she discovered something unpleasant. You'd do well not to follow her path." "Too late," I said, tipping my hat. I never could resist unpleasant things. When I stepped out onto the sidewalk again, the streetlights glowed like halos for sinners, and a black sedan rolled to a stop at the curb. The window lowered just enough to reveal Saul Pantzer's calm, unflappable face under his flat cap. "Archie," he said, "get in." "If Wolfe sent you to chaperone me, tell him I'm a big boy now." "No one sent me," Saul said. "I've got something." I climbed in. Saul drove with his usual discretion, like a priest escorting contraband. "What have you got?" I asked. "A rumour," he said. "The expelled member? She disappeared the same night Fritz received that spice sample." My stomach tightened. Fritz thought it was a gift, or a compliment. "Maybe," Saul said, "but someone wanted him to have it." "Why him?" "Because he's tied to Wolfe," Saul said, "and people with secrets don't like Wolfe." He wasn't wrong. Wolfe's ability to extract truth from reluctant throats made him about as popular as fire alarms at arson conventions. "What about the spice itself?" I asked. Saul handed me a note card. "Importer was murdered last year. Case never solved. That sample Wolfe examined? Same vintage, same source." "Beautiful," I muttered. "So now we've got a vanished historian, a murdered importer, and someone trying to tenderize Fritz." Saul parked outside a neon-lit restaurant where the clientele looked wealthy enough to sue over spilled water. "Anything else?" I asked. "One thing," Saul said. "Someone's been following you since Madison Avenue." "Any idea who?" He shook his head. "Slippery." "Great. I love slippery people. Makes chasing them more athletic." Inside, the decor looked like a velvet explosion. A maitre d' glided toward me with the expression of a man smelling something foreign. "Sir," he said, "if you plan to contaminate our atmosphere again—" "Relax," I said, brushing past him. "I'm just here to admire your carpet. I didn't know Red could be that angry." "You insult our establishment." "I haven't even started," I said. He puffed up. "If you cause trouble, I'll have grounds to sue." "Fantastic," I said. "If you sue, I'll counter-sue for emotional damage from that wallpaper. I may never recover." His face froze, and I took the moment to leave before he combusted. Outside, neon buzzed overhead like an irritated wasp. On my way back to the brownstone, I replayed everything in my head. The fear, the snobbery, the evasiveness. None of them had given me concrete answers, but they'd given me something better: direction. These people weren't just cooks and critics. They were gatekeepers of a secret, and someone inside their circle had decided Fritz was a threat. When I reached West 35th, the brownstone glowed like a steadfast lighthouse. Inside, Wolfe was in the office, pretending to read while really listening for my footsteps. "Well?" he demanded. "Your culinary cult is hiding something," I said. "Something worth killing for." He grunted. I suspected as much. "And the expelled member? Vanished?" "Of course." "And the spice sample, connected to a dead importer?" His eyes narrowed. "Ah." "Also," I added, "a maitre d' threatened to sue me." "Archie," he sighed, "must you antagonize everyone? Only the ones who deserve it." He closed his book. "Report in full after dinner." "Sure," I said, turning toward the hall. "But if any maitre d's come knocking, I'm hiding behind you." His snort followed me out, a perfect end note to a night steeped in steam, smoke, and far too many secrets. When I pushed open the office door that night, the first thing I noticed was Wolfe treating the little spice vial like it was a live scorpion with a grudge. It sat on a clean linen napkin, positioned exactly 4 inches from the edge of his desk, as if any deviation might trigger an explosion. Wolfe himself was leaning back in his chair with his lips pursed tightly enough to whistle a funeral march. The room smelled faintly of Fritz's abandoned sauce and the sharper scent of irritation. Wolfe's, not mine, for once. The lights were low, the air thick, and everything felt weighed down by the knowledge that someone had tried to turn Fritz into a culinary casualty. I stepped in and shut the door. "Evening, sir," or whatever we're calling a time of day when you're awake, sober, and staring at spices like they're murder weapons. He didn't look up. "Archie, sit." The command landed without drama, which was worse. I sat. Wolfe extended a finger toward the vial without touching it. "This," he said, "is older than it should be. Imported last year from a source now defunct. The importer, as you have learned, is dead." "Murdered," I added helpfully. "Yes," Wolfe snapped, "and if you interrupt me again, I shall revise your employment status." That was the Wolfe version of affection. I let him continue. "The presence of this sample in our kitchen," he said, "implies intent, poison. The knife in the tiles was not the primary method. It was dropped, likely in panic." "You mean Fritz scared the intruder?" Perhaps, or someone interfered, or the intruder suffered an injury. He gestured vaguely. The blood quantity is insufficient for Fritz to owe gratitude to a miracle. He's still lucky, I said. That knife was close. Wolfe grimaced at the understatement. It was placed, Archie, not swung. The intruder did not intend a physical attack. Their objective was ingestion, poisoning. This, he flicked his gaze at the vial, was the tool. I leaned back. Someone wanted to use Fritz as a delivery system. Kill him, kill someone else, or frame him. Wolfe closed his eyes. Your conjectures exhaust me. Then, take dictation. I got my notebook. He spoke in short, sharp bursts. 2. Lon Cohen. Request photostat of all records regarding the death of spice importer Angelo Ferretti. Include coroner's summary, police notes, Gazette archives, and any mention of Les Six tables. When he finished, I tore out the sheet and slipped it into my inside pocket. The bell rang at 9:07. Wolfe stiffened. If that is Kramer in a state, I may require restraint. I went to get it. To my surprise, Kramer wasn't in a state. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. The lines around his mouth had settled deeper, and his hat was pushed back like he'd forgotten how hats work. Goodwin, he said. Wolfe. Inspector, Wolfe replied. Kramer walked in, slow for him. No body, he said without preamble. We checked the hospitals, checked the morgue. Nothing with a stab wound, nothing matching any known associates of your chef. That reassures no one, Wolfe said. It annoys me, Kramer growled. Give me a corpse, I've got something to work with. Give me a knife and a cupful of blood, I've got nothing but paperwork and migraines. Wolfe surprised him by gesturing to the red chair. Sit. Kramer blinked. You offering me a chair? What's next, you baking me a cake? Archie will, Wolfe said dryly, if I require it. Kramer snorted and sat. I resisted the urge to applaud. Wolfe offering Kramer a seat was the emotional equivalent of serenading him. You have something else, Wolfe said. Kramer lit a cigar halfway, then remembered he was in Wolfe's office and pinched it out. I ran the blood type, AB negative. Rare, Wolfe murmured. Very, Kramer said. Could be the attacker. Could be someone else who bled recently and got dragged in, but no reports match. So, I said, we're in the dark, holding a candle shaped like a spice jar. Kramer shot me a look. Your metaphors hurt me, Goodwin. My pleasure. Wolfe steered us back on course. Inspector, what do you know of Les Six tables? Kramer grimaced. Snobs. Food purity nut jobs. Half of them probably think salt is sinful. We ran their names through our files. Nothing actionable. Not unless you count tax evasion by one of their founding members 20 years ago. Who was purged? Wolfe asked. A woman, Kramer said. Name, Elena Marneau, historian, specialized in ancient culinary traditions. Disappeared 3 nights ago. I felt Wolfe stiffen beside me. 3 nights, he repeated. Same night your man got that spice gift, Kramer said. Coincidence? Maybe. Coincidences, Wolfe said, are the excuses of fools. Kramer sighed. Look, Wolfe, I'm not here to fight. I'm here because this is getting messy. No new bodies, no clean suspects, and a chef who got rattled in his own kitchen. He stood. I'm going to keep this quiet another 12 hours. After that, the higher-ups will demand noise. Wolfe inclined his head. Thank you, Inspector. Kramer blinked again. Twice in one night? You all right, Wolfe? Wolfe ignored him, which was its own answer. Kramer left without drama. The door shut softly, as if the universe had decided to give us a temporary ceasefire. I turned back to Wolfe. Well, if that's not romantic, I don't know what is. Archie? Yes, sir? Shut up. Gladly. Wolfe gestured toward the spice vial. This is corruption masquerading as purity. These culinary zealots cloak malfeasance in rhetoric. They preach sanctity while smuggling, murdering, and intimidating. You mean you found a group even pickier than you? His glare could have cracked granite. Archie, if you persist... You'll fire me, I said cheerfully. Sure. You'd last 20 minutes. Maybe 19 if Fritz hides your beer. He didn't dignify that with a response. A soft knock. Saul Panzer stepped in, quiet as a rumour. Wolfe, Archie. Wolfe gestured. Report. Saul sat. Elena Marneau, confirmed. She visited here 2 weeks ago. I blinked. What? When? You were out, Saul said. She told Fritz she was writing about medieval spice trade routes, wanted to ask Wolfe about authenticity. Wolfe's nostrils flared. I recall her letter. I refused the interview. She came anyway, Saul said. Fritz served her lunch while she waited. Wolfe's face darkened. Fritz did not mention this. He forgot, Saul said. He had no reason to think she was connected. Until she vanished, I said. And, Saul added, her disappearance, same date as the importer's death anniversary. Wolfe's fingers drummed slowly. They silenced her, and attempted to silence Fritz, fearing he had received something from her. Saul nodded. She brought papers, notes, something. We haven't found them. Pfui, Wolfe spat. Idiocy. So what now? I asked. Wolfe fixed his gaze on me. Now, Archie, we prepare. For what? For war. He stood, a rare, deliberate rise, and crossed to the desk. Archie, fetch the address book. I did. We will summon, he said, every relevant figure tied to Les Six Tables, not merely suspects, anyone with knowledge, motive, or proximity. You're calling them here? I asked. To the brownstone? Yes. I whistled. That's your version of rolling tanks through their streets. Archie, he said, this household was invaded. Fritz was targeted. I will not tolerate violation. His voice was cold, but beneath it was something else. Protectiveness. Wolfe didn't say he cared. He demonstrated it by planning an ambush. I nodded. I'll get the list ready. Do so tonight, he said. We begin tomorrow. Sure, I said. But first, one question. Wolfe glared. What? Do we tell Fritz? No, Wolfe snapped. Then softer. Not until necessary. He turned away. You may go. I paused at the door. Wolfe? What? We'll get them. Yes, he said simply. We will. And with that, he pulled the bell cord, summoning Fritz, not for danger, but for the ritual comfort of routine. Dinner would be late, tempers tight, but the battle had officially begun. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I felt like a head waiter at the world's strangest banquet, which was appropriate since I was the one who had gone out and collected the guests. Wolfe had decreed the conference for 3:30 sharp, between lunch and orchids, which in our house has roughly the same flexibility as the phases of the moon. So, at 3:28 I was in the office watching the stage, Wolfe behind his desk, monumental, 3 empty chairs facing him, afternoon sun striping the rug, and across the hall a yellow glare from the orchid rooms, like a jury that had already reached a verdict. The bell rang at 3:29. Wolfe gave me a small nod, the kind he uses when he's pretending I'm merely a useful appliance. I went to get the first course. The snide food critic from Les Six Tables arrived with the air of a man stepping onto a lesser planet. His name was Victor LaSalle, and he wore it like an accusation. Tall and narrow, moustache penciled on, suit so understated it screamed about the effort. He sniffed as I took his hat. I see the decor has not improved, he said, glancing at the bookshelves. It's early, I told him. We're waiting for your contribution of taste. He sniffed again and sailed past me into the office. Next, the restaurateur, Carlo Bianchi, round where LaSalle was sharp, nervous where LaSalle was smug. He clutched his hat in both hands. Mr. Goodwin, he said, voice wobbly. I admire Mr. Wolfe very much. And Fritz. I came as soon as I received the call. You and every process server in Manhattan, I said. Relax. This is a social call, the kind where nobody smiles. He swallowed and followed me in. Last came the maitre d' from the purple velvet nightmare where I had recently offended the wallpaper. André Marchand arrived in a perfectly cut dark suit and an expression that suggested we were all slightly undercooked. If he could have entered on a puff of cologne and disdain, he would have. Back again, I greeted him. I was afraid I'd traumatized you permanently. You have, he said. But my employer insisted. He says Mr. Wolfe is influential. You have no idea, I said, and ushered him in. Inside, Wolfe had not moved. The 3 men took in the room 3 different ways. LaSalle with quick, appraising contempt, Bianchi with anxious awe, Marchand with the pinched suspicion of a man checking for dust. The light slanted across Wolfe's desk, catching the glass paperweight, the neat stacks of files, and the white napkin on which, like a condemned jewel, the little spice vial rested. "Gentlemen," Wolfe said. His voice was mild. That meant trouble. They sat. LaSalle claimed the centre chair without being asked. Bianchi edged left as if he wanted an escape route. Marchand sat right, spine rigid. "You are here," Wolfe said, "because someone entered my kitchen 2 nights ago and attempted to do my chef harm. You are connected to institutions or circles that intersect with that act. I require information." LaSalle smiled thinly. "You might have simply invited us to dinner, Mr. Wolfe. This feels rather like an inquisition." "Dinner," Wolfe said, "is for those who respect food and its servants. You will forgive me if I have reservations. Score 1 for the fat man." "Mr. Bianchi," Wolfe went on, turning his head slightly, "you esteem Fritz Brenner." "Yes, sir," Bianchi said quickly. "His work is famous. I have tried for years to convince him to consult for my restaurant. I would never—" Wolfe cut him off with a flick of his fingers. "At what point did Les Six Tables solicit Fritz for membership?" 3 times, Bianchi said. "Over 5 years. Letters, emissaries. He refused. He said he does not like cliques." "That is true," I put in. "He prefers pots." "Archie," Wolfe said warningly. I shut up mostly. "LaSalle," Wolfe said, turning, "you are a member of Les Six Tables." "An honoured one," LaSalle said. "We uphold standards the rabble cannot understand." "Fui," Wolfe murmured. LaSalle frowned. "I beg your pardon?" "I doubt it," Wolfe said. "What is the Society's position on Mr. Brenner?" LaSalle crossed one leg with surgical precision. "We respect his talent. However, some of our number consider his association with you compromising. They believe you treat cuisine as a tool for investigation rather than as an art." "I treat it," Wolfe said dryly, "as both. That disturbs your priests?" LaSalle's nostrils flared, but he didn't answer. "Mr. Marchand," Wolfe said, "your establishment supplies staff and space for Les Six Tables." "I host private dinners," Marchand said stiffly. "I do not inquire into the politics of my patrons." I caught his right hand smoothing his trouser seam once, twice, 3 times. For a man who claimed indifference, he was polishing himself like silverware. Wolfe let silence stretch. He's the only man I know who can make quiet sound like a loaded gun. The ticking of the clock grew loud. Bianchi shifted. LaSalle gazed at the ceiling in a show of boredom that was starting to crack. Marchand kept glancing at the vial, then away. 2 nights ago," Wolfe said at last, "someone in this city took action against my chef. The knife they left in my tiles was clumsy. The vial on my desk," he nodded to it, "is not. You will tell me what you know of how this vintage of spice passed into private hands after Angelo Ferretti's death." Bianchi licked his lips. "I know nothing. I swear it. I only buy through proper channels." LaSalle interrupted. "This is absurd. Rare imports circulate, collectors hoard. That vial could have come from any gourmand with more money than sense." "That narrows it," I said. "Slightly." Marchand spoke, his voice brittle. "You cannot expect us to track every ounce of spice that crosses the ocean. We are not customs agents." "No," Wolfe agreed. "You are not. You are conduits, and conduits know their sources." LaSalle bristled. "Are you accusing us of smuggling, Mr. Wolfe?" "I am accusing you," Wolfe said calmly, "of preferring ritual to responsibility. A woman is missing. A man is dead. My chef was attacked. Do not insult me with wounded pride." The name dropped into the room like a stone when he spoke it. Elena Marnot. Bianchi flinched. LaSalle's eyelids fluttered. Marchand's hand went to his tie. "You all know her," I observed. "That saves time." "She was a historian," LaSalle said stiffly. "We invited her to speak on the lineage of European spice routes." "And then you expelled her," Wolfe said. LaSalle's mouth tightened. "She violated our trust. She copied a proprietary recipe without permission." "Oh, the horror," I said. "Call the Hague." "Archie," Wolfe said, but there was a ghost of appreciation there. Bianchi cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe." I tried to speak against her expulsion. She loved the old ways. He stopped. "She what?" I prodded. "She came to see Fritz. Here," he said miserably. "She told me later she believed he understood food as history, not just as business. She admired him." "That visit is known," Wolfe said. "When did you last see her alive?" 2 weeks ago," Bianchi said. At my restaurant. She was with a chef I know, Henri Valette. Temperamental but talented. They argued. I thought it was just professional. Valette, I repeated. Where is he now? Gone, Bianchi said. He left Manhattan 3 days ago. No forwarding address. Only a note saying the city had become unwholesome. That narrows it down too, I muttered. LaSalle scoffed. Henri is harmless. If you are hunting for a villain, you will not find him in some sulking Frenchman. You'd prefer us to look at whom? I asked. Your tailor? Goodwin, Wolfe said, voice like a clamp. I shut up again, but not without a grin. Marchand shifted. Perspiration finally beaded at his hairline, and the lacquered facade started to crack. Wolfe noticed. Wolfe always notices. Mr. Marchand, he said softly, have you seen Miss Marneau since her expulsion? No, Marchand said too quickly. Wolfe's eyes half closed. You lie poorly. Try again. She came once, Marchand said after a beat. After the expulsion. She dined alone. She asked questions about our suppliers. I told her nothing. And then? Wolfe asked. And then she left, Marchand said. I never saw her again. His hand twitched toward the vial. If you think I had anything to do with this, you are mistaken. For a moment I almost believed him. Almost. As red herrings go, he was beautifully seasoned. The phone on Wolfe's desk rang at 4:08. That put us into orchid time, and I saw his mouth twitch with annoyance. Archie, he said. I picked up. Nero Wolfe's residence, Goodwin. Kramer's voice grumbled in my ear. I've got something. I'm outside, but I won't come in. Tell Wolfe this. Someone dropped a package at the precinct. No return. Inside, a towel soaked in blood. White towel. Fritz's initials inked in the corner, not sewn. It's not from your house. A chill crawled up my arm. Message received, I said. Anything else? Yeah, Kramer said. Tell Wolfe this isn't a joke. Whoever's doing this is escalating. I relayed it. Wolfe's jaw hardened. Our 3 guests watched me, variously curious, nervous, and offended. When I repeated Fritz's initials, Bianchi made a strangled sound. Mon Dieu, he whispered. They are trying to frighten him. LaSalle frowned. What an absurdly theatrical gesture. You should approve then, I said. Wolfe ignored us both. He stared at the vial, then at the men, his eyes colder than the beer Fritz usually brings at 6. You will all, he said, remain available. If I summon you again, you will come. If you do not, I will assume guilt. LaSalle bristled. You have no authority. I have sufficient authority, Wolfe said, to champion my own. That is enough. There it was again, under the formality, the line in the sand for Fritz. He rang for Fritz, not because he needed food that would wait for 8, but because ritual was his way of tightening the bolts. Fritz appeared in the doorway, pale but upright, and the 3 guests turned to look at the man whose kitchen somebody had invaded. For once, none of them had anything clever to say. Archie, Wolfe said, eyes still on the vial, you will find Henri Valette. Sure, I said. Any particular continent you'd like him from? Do not be inane, Wolfe said. Begin with his last employer, his bank, his fellow zealots. Use Mr. Panzer if needed. Got it, I said. Track the vanished chef, protect the living one. Precisely, Wolfe said. You and no one else will oversee this. I will not entrust Fritz's safety to strangers. That landed like a hand on my shoulder. He didn't look at me when he said it, but he didn't have to. The guests filed out, carrying their fear and their lies and their precious hierarchy with them, and I was left with marching orders, a missing chef on my list, and the distinct feeling that the next move in this little culinary war was going to be mine. Which, between us, suited me fine. I've always said Manhattan has 2 faces, the one it shows to people with money, and the one it saves for people in trouble. I was walking through the latter around dusk, threading between warehouses near the docks while a wind off the river slapped at my coat. If the city had a throat, this district was the part it cleared just before spitting. Saul Panzer was a silent shadow half a step behind me, hands in his pockets, gaze sharp enough to shave with. We'd tracked the missing chef, Henri Valette, to a hotel that advertised rooms with character, which was a polite way of saying rooms recently used for fistfights. The lobby smelled like tired carpet and older regrets. The night clerk looked at me like I was there to repossess his soul. Saul handled the talking, because when Saul used his voice, people listened, confessed, and sometimes wept. 2 minutes later, we were climbing a narrow staircase lit by a bulb that seemed undecided about its job. The hallway was long, grim, and quiet enough to hear mice reconsidering their life choices. We stopped outside room 14. Saul tapped once. No answer. He tapped again, a rhythm only he could get away with. Finally, a voice inside cracked like a twig under pressure. "Who is it?" "People who don't want you dead," I said. There was shuffling, a click, and the door opened 2 inches. One gaunt eye stared out. Henri Valette was thinner than talent ought to permit, with cheekbones sharp enough to slice salami, and hands that twitched compulsively like they were remembering knives. "Are you with them?" he whispered. "If by them you mean the lunatics who think parsley has moral purity, then no," I said. "We're the other lunatics." Saul slipped a foot into the opening and eased the door wider. Henri scuttled back like a crab escaping a pot. The room was depressing enough to make a rat demand an upgrade. Single bed, sagging, peeling wallpaper patterned with roses that had died slow deaths. A lamp with a crooked shade listing like a doomed ship. Henri himself perched on the edge of the bed, jittery as cold gelatin. "You shouldn't have come," he muttered. "They'll see you." "Who?" I asked, leaning against the dresser that had seen better centuries. "The tables," he whispered. "Furniture?" I said. "Or the gourmet cult?" He flinched. "Be careful. They have ears everywhere." "This place?" I looked around. "The only ears here belong to rodents." Saul sat in the lone chair. "Valette, we need facts." Henri pressed his palms to his face. "I didn't steal recipes. They framed me. They wanted me gone before they—" He stopped himself. "Before they what?" I asked. "Collect more spice samples from dead importers. Threaten more chefs. Get new wallpaper for their private dining room." "You don't understand," Henri said. "Les Six Tables is not a club. It is a doctrine." I shot Saul a look. "A doctrine with a subscription fee." "They called me contaminated," Henri whispered, "because I questioned them, because I refused to serve a dish I knew was stolen from another chef. They said I was jeopardizing the purity." Saul leaned forward. "Who specifically said that?" Henri swallowed. "Marnot, but she wasn't one of them. She was curious." "Elena Marnot," I said, "the historian." Henri nodded frantically. "She discovered something about their ingredients, the imports, the forged papers, the spices they used for their heritage menus. She said she had proof. She wanted to expose them." "What kind of proof?" I asked. "Documents, notes, shipping ledgers. She knew about Ferretti. She knew they were smuggling." There it was, the secret ingredient, crime. "She visited Fritz," I said, "at the brownstone." Henri's eyes widened. "Yes, to warn him. She said someone in the society believed he was contaminated too, because he cooks for Nero Wolfe. Because Wolfe refuses to acknowledge their purity laws. They hate him." "Well," I said, "Wolfe has that effect on people." Henri stood abruptly, pacing like a cat in a shrinking cage. "She disappeared 3 days ago. Everyone knows. At the docks they whisper. They say they found her body in the East River." My breath stalled. "Found?" "Not officially," Henri whispered. "Someone saw, someone heard, but no one reports anything down here. Too afraid." "Body?" I repeated. My voice sounded foreign. Henri nodded. "They silenced her because she knew too much." Saul's head dipped slightly, his version of a wince. "Who killed her?" Henri squeezed his hands. "I don't know, but someone bragged, someone drunk, said she won't be asking questions anymore." The room seemed to tilt. For all her curiosity, Elena Marnot had been just a historian who liked spices, and that had gotten her dumped in a river. "Why'd you run?" I asked quietly. Henri stared at me. "Because I was next. Because they blamed me for letting her research slip. Because they said I needed purification." He shuddered. "Do you know what that means to them? Shame, banishment, or death made to look accidental." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Look, pal, you're either scared of the wrong people or talking to the wrong detective. What do you want?" Henri turned desperate eyes on me. "To live," I sighed, Reasonable. Rare these days. Saul rose. "Valette, did you attack Fritz?" "No," Henri gasped. "I admire him. Everyone admires him. He is a maestro. I would never harm him." "But someone thought he had Marno's notes," Saul said. Henri nodded. "They feared she left them with him, or with him." He pointed vaguely, but we knew he meant Wolfe. Of course. If you wanted to bury the truth, you killed the truth-tellers. If you wanted to make sure nothing reached Wolfe, you smothered anyone who might pass him a clue. I checked my watch. "We need to call Wolfe." Henri panicked. "No, you cannot tell him I am here." "Relax," I said. "Wolfe doesn't move. At all. His idea of increasing his radius is shifting in his chair." I found a corner payphone outside the hotel entrance. The metal was cold, the view bleak, the wind unpleasant enough to make me consider developing a tropical personality. I dialed home. "Wolfe's residence," he said. "It's me. We found Valette." Silence. Long, heavy. "Do not," Wolfe said finally, voice tight as piano wire. "Bring that man here." My eyebrows rose. "Sir?" "Keep him hidden. Listen to Saul Panzer in all directives. Do not bring him to this house. Do not allow him near Fritz. Not until I have determined the nature of the threat." Protectiveness disguised as authority. Classic Wolfe. "Understood," I said. "Any other wisdom?" "Return when you are done," Wolfe said. "And for heaven's sake, Archie, stay alert." That was Wolfe speak for try not to die. "Yes, sir," I said. "Always do." I hung up. Saul waited beside me, hands in pockets, calm as ever. "He doesn't want Valette near the house," I said. "Expected," Saul replied. "And he's tense." "He's worried," Saul said. "Wolfe doesn't get worried," I corrected. "He gets irritated with emotion." Saul didn't argue. We returned to the hotel. Henri sat where we left him, wringing his hands like he was washing invisible dishes. "Listen carefully," I said. "Someone's going to come hunting again. Not for you. For whatever Marno left behind. They think Fritz has it. Or Wolfe. Or you." Henri swallowed. "What do I do?" "You stay hidden," Saul said, "and you tell us everything you remember. Every name, every meeting, every argument." Henri nodded quickly. "I will. Anything." I stood by the window. Outside, the street lamps flickered like they were debating whether the night was worth illuminating. A shadow moved near the corner, too fast, too intent. Someone was following us. Again. It clicked into place slowly, like a lock turning. The assault on Fritz wasn't about killing him, and it wasn't about killing Wolfe. It was about erasing the evidence Marno had found. Evidence that could expose a smuggling ring, a murder, and a society willing to kill for cuisine. If they couldn't find the notes, they'd silence anyone who might have touched them. Fritz, Valette, maybe even me. "Saul," I said quietly, "we've got company outside." "I know," he said. "Been there 20 minutes. Of course he knew. "We need to move," I said. "Yes," Saul agreed, "but carefully." Henri looked between us, terrified. "Are they here?" "Probably not yet," I said, "but they will be, soon." The realization settled like cold soup in my stomach. This wasn't over. Not close. The attacker wasn't done. They were just getting started. By the time I reached the front stoop that morning, the scene looked like a Broadway premiere where someone had forgotten to invite the stars and instead sent every reporter in New York. Flashbulbs exploded like pocket-sized lightning strikes. Microphones were thrust toward my chin by men who smelled of ink, sweat, and ambition. One enthusiastic fellow nearly tripped over a shrub in his haste to ask if Nero Wolfe was sheltering a fugitive culinary assassin. It was 8:42 in the morning, not a time anyone should be yelled at about culinary assassins. I held up a hand. "Gentlemen, you're blocking my sunlight, and that's impolite to a man who hasn't had coffee yet." "Goodwin," someone barked, "is it true you're hiding a chef accused in 2 mysterious deaths?" "Absolutely," I said. "We've also started smuggling soufflés across state lines. The crime wave is unstoppable." Half of them scribbled furiously. The other half shouted more questions. I squeezed through, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let the blessed quiet swallow me. Then I saw Wolfe in the office doorway, arms folded, scowl deep enough to hold rainwater. "Confound their impudence," he muttered. "You'll want to avoid the windows," I said, "in case they start using telescopes." He grunted. That was Wolfe speak for, "This is intolerable and someone will pay." On his desk lay the Morning Gazette, folded to the front page. The headline screamed, "Chef on the Run, Sheltered by Nero Wolfe, Anonymous Tip Links, Brownstone to Culinary Deaths." A smaller subhead offered moral support. "Is the famous detective obstructing justice?" I whistled. "Well, we finally made page 1. I always hoped it'd be for a casserole recipe." Wolfe stabbed a finger at the byline. "Anonymous Tip." His tone suggested the writer deserved a one-way trip to an unmarked grave. I sat and flipped the newspaper open. The article claimed Wolfe was harbouring a fugitive chef connected to irregularities in exotic spice imports and one unsolved death. It mentioned Fritz by association. It called Wolfe's brownstone a site of suspicious culinary activity. And the kicker? It quoted insider jargon from Les Six Tables, terminology only members would know. Someone was trying to turn the world against Wolfe before he could act. The phone rang at 9:04. Wolfe jabbed at it with 2 fingers. "Archie," I answered. "Goodwin speaking." Lon Cohen's voice came in, low and strained. "Arch, don't hang up. I need 5 seconds." "You'll get 2, I said. "That tip came in last night," he said. "Unsigned, detailed, too detailed. The editors ran it before I saw the proofs. I'm sorry, I tried to stop it." "Lon," I said, "if apologies were money, you'd be a Rockefeller. But this is a mess." "I know." His voice dropped further. "I think someone high in Les Six Tables is feeding the Gazette to push Wolfe into a corner. Be careful, the sharks smell blood." "You're telling me?" I hung up and turned to Wolfe. "That was Lon. He says the article was planted." "I deduced that," Wolfe said. "The phrasing, the precision, it was crafted to provoke public indignation." "Well," I said, "mission accomplished. The press outside looks ready to roast us on a spit." Wolfe went to his desk, lowered himself into his chair, and pressed his fingertips together. "This is intolerable." "It's Tuesday," I reminded him. "Phooey." At 9:21 sharp, the bell rang again. Not the reporters, but something heavier, more procedural. I opened the door to find Inspector Kramer on the steps, hat low, coat collar turned up, jaw clenched so tight he could have cracked walnuts with his molars. "Goodwin," he grunted, "let me in." "No reporters allowed," I said. "House rule." "I'm not a reporter," he barked. "Exactly," I said, stepping aside. "They're better dressed." He stomped inside. I closed the door behind him and led him to the office. Wolfe looked up with the expression of a man being handed a bill for damage he did not cause. "Inspector," Wolfe said, voice cool. "Wolfe," Kramer replied, equally cool. He didn't sit. He didn't take off his coat. He took out the Gazette and slapped it onto Wolfe's desk with enough force to alarm the paper fibres. "You see this?" "I have been subjected to it," Wolfe said. Kramer growled. "City Hall is on me. The DA wants action. The Commissioner wants progress. And half the public wants your head stuffed and mounted above the precinct door." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "How flattering." "I'm not joking," Kramer snapped. "A warrant is being drafted. They're giving me a few hours to handle this quietly. If you stonewall me, they'll break down your door and drag out everyone inside." "That would be inadvisable," Wolfe murmured. "It would be political suicide for me," Kramer said, "and a circus for you. So I'm here asking, not ordering, for cooperation." That was rare enough to make me blink. Kramer never asked unless the stakes were ugly. Wolfe leaned back. "Inspector, I have not obstructed justice. I have not concealed evidence. I have not harboured a fugitive." Kramer glared. "You better not be lying." "I do not lie," Wolfe said sharply, then added, "and Archie would not permit it." "True," I said, "not unless the lie helps me personally, and you know how rare that is." Kramer rubbed a hand over his face. "Look, Wolfe, all I need is assurance, no tricks, no evasions. If you've got something, you tell me. If you're planning something, you warn me, because the next move from the higher-ups is a battering ram." Wolfe studied him for a long moment, then, "I will not impede the law, but I will protect my household." Kramer exhaled slowly. "I'll take that, for now." He turned to leave, but paused just long enough to mutter, "Be smart, Wolfe, and Goodwin. Keep him from doing anything stupid." "I've been trying for years," I said. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he left. I waited until the door clicked shut. That went well. For a crisis, Wolfe allowed. I sat and tapped the newspaper. Anonymous tip uses Les Six Tables terminology. That narrows our list of saboteurs. Yes, Wolfe said grimly. One of them seeks to preempt my deductions. And use the press to box you in, I added. He grunted. Archie. Yes? Keep the reporters away from the windows. I'll tell them you're allergic to flash powder, I said, which you probably are. At that moment, Fritz appeared at the office doorway, pale but standing straight. Mr. Wolfe, he said, I can prepare lunch at 1. The reporters— No, Wolfe's voice cracked like a whip. You will remain in your room. Fritz blinked. Sir, I do not wish to be a burden. Nonsense, Wolfe snapped. You are indispensable. Go. Fritz stiffened, nodded, and stepped back. I nearly dropped my pencil. Well, I said, if you ever need a best man for his wedding, I'm available. Archie, Wolfe warned, but there was a flicker of vulnerability he couldn't hide completely. I opened the window blinds a sliver. Reporters swarmed the curb. One shouted, Mr. Goodwin, is it true Wolfe cooks corpses into stews? Yes, I called back. We're offering samples at 6. Flashbulbs fired. I shut the blinds. At 11:15, Saul called from wherever he was hiding Valette. Archie, he said, your anonymous Gazette tip. It used the phrase culinary apostates. That's internal language. Only the inner circle uses it. Wonderful, I said. Means our mole has a thesaurus. And a motive, Saul added. Someone wants Wolfe cornered. Tell me something cheerful next time, I said, and hung up. Wolfe rang the bell cord at 12:38. I followed him into the dining room. He didn't eat much, a sign the world was indeed ending. Fritz's absence weighed on him like a missing limb. At 1 o'clock sharp, I returned to the office. Wolfe sat like a man sculpted out of patience and fury. Archie, he said, prepare telegrams. For whom? For everyone, he said. Every suspect, every meddler, every cowardly devotee of that culinary cabal. All summoned here? Yes, Wolfe said. Tonight. I raised an eyebrow. Planning a party? Archie, Wolfe said, we are casting a net. And catching? Truth, he said darkly, and whoever dares oppose it. I nodded. The battle lines were drawn, and Wolfe, pushed into a corner by ego-driven gourmets and anonymous saboteurs, was about to push back the only way he knew, by dragging every enemy into his office and smashing them with facts until they begged for mercy. Right, I said. I'll send the summons. It felt good to be loading the cannon. As I reached for the phone, another volley of flashbulbs went off outside. The world was watching. Good. They were about to see fireworks. If Manhattan had a witching hour for trouble, it was apparently 9:15 at night, because that's when Fritz and I returned from his medical checkup to find a shadow clinging to the curb outside the brownstone like it was waiting to commit slander. The doctor had pronounced him shaken but solid. I pronounced him overdue for bed. But the second my shoes hit the pavement, the hairs on the back of my neck performed a precision salute. Inside, I murmured. Fritz blinked. Mr. Goodwin? Inside, I repeated, pushing the door key forward like it was a weapon. Now! He didn't argue. You learn not to when a man with my instincts gets twitchy. A shape moved near the alley. Quick, low, intentional. Not a drunk, not a stray. Someone watching the house with purpose. A flicker of a coat, then the scrape of a shoe. Fritz hurried into the vestibule. I shoved him through, slammed the door behind him, and pivoted toward the alley. Hey! I barked. The figure bolted. I sprinted after him. Long strides, good shoes, righteous anger. The alley slapped me with cold shadows and the perfume of yesterday's garbage, but I saw the shine of a sleeve as the intruder darted behind a crate. He had reach and speed, but I had stubbornness and a .38 I preferred not to use unless someone insisted. Hold it, I yelled. He didn't hold it. He vaulted a low fence and vanished between two buildings with the practiced talent of a man who'd spent his youth fleeing consequences. I followed 3 steps, 4, then Wolfe's voice detonated behind me. Archie! That stopped me faster than a brick wall. Nero Wolfe yelling my name out a window was rarer than a polite cabbie, and considerably louder. I reversed course and sprinted back. The office window was open. Wolfe framed in it like an outraged monument. "Cease that idiocy and return at once." When Wolfe puts capital letters into a sentence, you obey. I dashed back inside. Fritz hovered in the hallway, pale and apologetic, as though he'd caused the alley itself. "Upstairs," Wolfe commanded from the landing above. "To your room immediately." Fritz went. I entered the office in time for the night's next performance. The crash of a brick shattering the window, spraying glass across the rug. I dropped instinctively. Wolfe recoiled but did not rise. Physics forbids hurling 280 pounds into motion without advanced planning. A small note was tied to the brick with twine. I lifted it, careful not to disturb evidence. The handwriting was neat, upright, humourless. "Stop cooking with what is not yours." "Well," I said, "that's charming. Someone should knit it on a pillow." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Archie, the wording." "I see it," I said. "What is not yours? That's not about Fritz's spices. That's about the historian's notes." "Indeed," he growled. "Proof the zealots fear exposure. They mistake intimidation for strategy." The bell rang at 9:32. I went to open it, bracing for reporters with more camera bulbs. Instead, Inspector Kramer, looking like a man who had put in a request for rest and been denied on philosophical grounds. "No jokes," he grunted as he entered. "Not tonight." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said. "You look like you ate a subpoena." He stopped short when he saw the broken glass. "What happened?" "Community outreach," I said. "Brick division." Wolfe explained with clipped precision, showing him the note. Kramer read it, exhaled through his nose, and placed it gently on the desk. "All right," he said. "We're posting 2 men outside your door. No fanfare, no paperwork, don't argue." Wolfe blinked. "Inspector." "Save it," Kramer said. "You've got enough enemies tonight. I'm not joining them." He rubbed his forehead. "You're lucky this came after sunset. Day shift would have turned this into street theatre." I couldn't resist. "And night shift only charges matinee pricing." Kramer ignored me. "Listen, Wolfe, I can't stop the warrant forever. But if you keep getting attacked, I can at least justify protecting the perimeter." "You have my gratitude," Wolfe said stiffly. Kramer shot him a sharp look. "Don't make me regret it. I'll have Stebbins doing rounds. Try not to bite him." He left through the front door, barking orders at 2 uniforms stationed unobtrusively at the curb. Fritz's curtains upstairs fluttered slightly. He was watching from safety. "Archie," Wolfe said darkly, "secure the room." I swept the glass, shut the blinds tight, and collected the brick for photostats. Wolfe gave orders like artillery fire. Locks checked, hall lights adjusted, doors monitored. At 10:21, Saul slipped into the office with the silence of a rumour. He looked at the broken window, then at Wolfe. "New development," Wolfe gestured. "Proceed." Saul handed me a small brown envelope. "Found this at the post office. They held it because the sender underpaid postage. Postmarks from 3 days ago, addressed to Wolfe." I opened it carefully. Inside, a thin notebook, worn, water-stained, still faintly smelling of spice. Elena Marno's handwriting filled the pages. Lists, dates, shipping ledgers, supplier codes, and a final page underlined 3 times. "The mastermind is," followed by a name we recognized, a name respected far too widely. Wolfe inhaled sharply. "So, the architect of the ring." "And they knew she mailed you this," Saul said, "which means they've been watching the brownstone since before she died." I looked at the note on the brick. "And now they think we have what she discovered. They're escalating." Saul nodded. "Valette confirms everything in here. If this gets out, Les Six Tables collapses, and someone high in the food chain goes to prison." Wolfe pressed both hands to the desk. "The audacity to throw a brick at my house. That," I said, "is the part that offends you." "Archie," Wolfe snapped, "control your levity." "That is my levity controlled." He glared, then turned to Saul. "Continue watching Valette. Do not bring him here. Keep him beyond their reach." Saul nodded once and vanished back into the night, a ghost in a flat cap. Upstairs, Fritz's floorboards creaked softly, pacing, anxiety, the quiet kind that bruises the air. Wolfe called up, "Fritz, to your room. You will remain there." Fritz's voice floated down. "Yes, sir, but I hate to be any trouble." Wolfe's reply was sharp enough to count as affection. "You are not trouble. You are essential. Now go." I blinked. Wolfe wasn't just protecting Fritz, he was admitting it. When the house was silent again, Wolfe closed the historian's notebook and tapped it once, decisively. "Archie," he said, "tomorrow we strike back." "Against who?" I asked. "Against all of them," he said. "Summon every suspect, every accomplice, every coward." "You're calling a conclave," I said. "I am," he replied. "They've thrown bricks. Now they will face facts." I sat on the edge of the desk. "And us?" Wolfe exhaled, not a sigh, but something dangerously close. "You," he said, "will remain vigilant, and you will not pursue intruders alone again." "Well, sir," I said, unable to suppress a grin, "that's practically a hug." "Phooey," he muttered, but he didn't deny it. And that, in Wolfe speak, was a confession. If I had to pick the exact moment when Nero Wolfe stopped being merely irritated and began radiating the kind of focused fury that could heat a small country, it was around 8:47 the next evening, when he sat down with Elena Marnot's notebook and opened it like he was unveiling a sacred relic. The room was quiet except for the distant growl of Manhattan traffic and Wolfe's soft, steady breaths. A single lamp burned at his elbow, throwing an amber pool across the desk, turning the pages gold. If he'd had a choir behind him humming ominously, it wouldn't have felt out of place. He read, slowly, thoroughly, grimly. I watched from my usual chair. "You know," I said, "you're reading it like it's scripture." "And scowling," I added, "like it's bad scripture." Wolfe did not dignify me with a glare. That told me everything. He was busy thinking, and thinking hard. Fritz hovered in the doorway, pale, steady, quietly anxious. Rain started tapping at the window, soft at first and then harder, like it wanted in on the case. "She catalogued everything," Wolfe murmured. "Ingredients, shipments, counterfeit customs stamps, and their hierarchy, their rituals." "Cultish cooks with delusions of sainthood," I said. "We knew that." "Not enough," Wolfe muttered. "These are not merely zealots. They are merchants of exclusivity. They profit from the scarcity they manufacture." He tapped a page. "The mastermind's name appears here. Twice." I leaned forward. "Which one?" He didn't blink. "Carlo Bianchi." That nearly bounced me out of my chair. "The nervous restaurateur, the one who admired Fritz like a kid admires Santa Claus?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "a calculated performance. His kindness masked control. His fear was not fear, it was caution." I shook my head. I thought it was indigestion. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "You are a nincompoop." "That's our Bond talking," I said. He resumed reading. "Bianchi engineered the expulsion of Marnot when she learned too much. He used Lessig's tables as a shield, a banner of purity to hide smuggling and intimidation. He owns the import channels. He profits from the scarcity." "And when she mailed you proof," I said, "he panicked." "Precisely." Wolfe closed the notebook with ceremonial finality. "He ordered the attack on Fritz. He ordered the harassment, and he is escalating." The rain was coming harder now, hissing against the glass. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Wolfe said, "we assemble them." "All of them?" "All," he said. "Summon every suspect, every associate, every meddlesome official, and Inspector Kramer." "You're inviting Kramer?" I asked. "Formally? Should I prepare smelling salts?" "Archie," Wolfe snapped, "prepare the calls." I went to the phone and started dialing. Restaurants, offices, private numbers, backroom lines. My voice took on the cadence of doom paired with courtesy. "Mr. Wolfe requests your presence. Yes, tonight. Yes, at the Brownstone. No, he will not consider an alternative time. He rarely does." One by one, they committed. By 10:30, the office felt like a theatre waiting for curtains to rise. Fritz stood at the doorway, hand on the frame, determined but tired. The lamplight painted half his face in gold, the other half in shadow. Wolfe sat behind his desk like the presiding judge of a very exclusive underworld tribunal. "Sir," Fritz murmured, "shall I prepare refreshments?" "No," Wolfe said. "You will not risk yourself further. Stay upstairs." Fritz hesitated. "But you could faint, trip, be struck by another brick," Wolfe snapped. "Do not argue with me." Fritz swallowed. "Yes, sir." He left. Wolfe watched him go, his jaw tightening. For a moment I almost believed Wolfe might actually stand, march upstairs and tuck Fritz into bed. But emotional expression is not his sport. I typed the notes Wolfe dictated, slow, precise instructions, a list of questions to ask, observations to highlight, traps to set. Rain drummed harder, a steady percussion underscoring the tension in the room. "If your glare gets any hotter," I said, "Fritz could saute onions on your desk blotter." "Archie," Wolfe said, "attend." "I am attending," I said. "I'm just seasoning." He closed his eyes briefly. "You are adequate." I froze mid-keystroke. "Say that again?" "No," Wolfe said quickly. If he'd said he loved me, the shock would have been the same magnitude. In Wolfe speak, adequate was practically a declaration of paternal devotion. "Noted," I said, trying not to grin. "I'll put that on my tombstone." "Do not tempt me," he muttered. At 11:10 the bell rang. I checked the window. Rain, police posted outside, and a car pulling up with headlights slicing the wet street. Our first guests had arrived. I opened the door. Victor LaSalle entered, immaculate even in the rain, umbrella angled at a mathematically perfect tilt. "I hope this is urgent," he sniffed. "I have appointments tomorrow." "Cancel them," I said. "You'll be busy being interrogated." Behind him came Marchand the maitre d', face tight, slicked hair slightly dampened by the weather. Then one of their culinary cronies, a spice broker with the personality of a wilted parsley sprig. Finally Carlo Bianchi arrived, flushed, worried, hat in hand. "Mr. Goodwin," he said breathlessly, "is Fritz all right? I came as fast as I could." "You always do," I said dryly. "Right this way." They filed into the office. Wolfe didn't rise, never does, but the set of his shoulders was steeper, harder, a fortress preparing for siege. "Gentlemen," Wolfe said, "be seated." LaSalle sat with a huff. Marchand perched like a crane on a branch. Bianchi tried to sit quietly, but his nerves made the chair squeak. "I have assembled you," Wolfe began, "because a woman has been murdered, another nearly, and a smuggling enterprise has stained the city's culinary heritage." Gasps, murmurs. LaSalle scoffed. "This is melodrama." "Silence," Wolfe said. He opened the notebook. The pages glowed in the lamplight like they had their own illumination. "Elena Marneau," Wolfe said, "learned of corruption hidden within Les Six Tables, a conspiracy to forge import documents, monopolize rare spices, and threaten dissenters under the guise of purity. She confronted your group and was removed. Permanently." Bianchi made a strangled sound. "Mr. Wolfe, I assure you." "You," Wolfe said, pointing at him, "engineered her expulsion." "No," Bianchi blurted. "I tried to defend her." "A lie," Wolfe said coldly. "Her notes record your role clearly." Wolfe lifted the notebook and tapped a page. "Page 42, he said. "Your handwriting, your code, your shipments." LaSalle stiffened. Marchand paled. The spice broker whispered a prayer. "Furthermore," Wolfe went on, "you arranged for your adherents to intimidate those who threatened disclosure. You instigated the attack on Fritz Brenner, believing Miss Marneau had given him her findings." Bianchi shook his head violently. No, I swear. Those shipments, they were old records. She misinterpreted." "Pfui," Wolfe said softly. "You mistake truth for interpretation. The facts are unambiguous." Rain hammered the windows harder, like punctuation. LaSalle stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Carlo is a coward, not a mastermind." "Sit," Wolfe commanded. LaSalle sat. Immediately. At that moment, the bell rang again. I slipped out and opened the door to find Inspector Kramer, hat dripping, mood volcanic. "I was invited," he said gruffly. "Don't make me regret accepting." "Not my department," I said. "Enter the arena." He marched into the office and sized up the suspects. "Jesus," he muttered. "All of them? Wolfe, you planning to stage a Broadway revival of Guilty as Sin?" "Inspector," Wolfe said, "you will find Ms. Marneau's murderer in this room." Kramer's eyebrows climbed. "Then let's get to it." Wolfe resumed. "The structure is simple. Bianchi used Les Six Tables as a front. Perhaps not all members knew, but enough. They smuggled rare spices. They silenced dissent. They used intimidation. They attacked my chef." Bianchi stammered. I never harmed Fritz. You ordered it, Wolfe said. Your handwriting is on the threat posted at his kitchen door. I produced the photostat I'd taken and handed it to Kramer. He compared it to a signature card and grunted. Well, hell, he said. It matches. Bianchi collapsed into his chair, face drained. You don't understand, he whispered. I didn't kill her. I only wanted control. She threatened everything. She said she'd expose the ring, but I didn't kill her. Then who did? Kramer barked. Bianchi pointed at Marchand. He knew. He was there. Liar, Marchand shouted. You told me she would be frightened, not hurt. LaSalle leapt up. Gentlemen, please. Wolfe slammed his palm onto the desk. Enough. Silence fell. Even the rain paused long enough to listen. Wolfe leaned back. You may bicker, you may deflect, but the truth is here. Inspector, you have motive, means, conspiracy, and confession enough to unravel the entire ring. Kramer nodded grimly. Yeah, looks that way. Bianchi sobbed once. Marchand clenched his fists. LaSalle looked ready to faint elegantly. Wolfe closed the notebook. We are done. Kramer stepped forward. Everyone stay seated. No one leaves until I say so. I exhaled slowly. The showdown had begun, and Wolfe had laid the path bare, stone by stone, fact by fact. As I moved behind Wolfe's chair, he murmured just loud enough for me to hear. Archie. Yes, sir? You have been adequate, I grinned. I know. You're practically overflowing with affection tonight. Phooey, he muttered, and the room held its breath as truth finally settled, heavy as thunder. I found Fritz in the kitchen, breathing deeply to steady himself. I clapped him gently on the shoulder. Dinner at 8 tomorrow, pal. The world keeps spinning. He managed a small smile. Yes, and tomorrow we celebrate surviving. By the time the table was set the next night, the scent of Fritz's cooking filled the brownstone like a benediction. At 8 o'clock sharp the next evening, Wolfe descended in the elevator, took his seat, and accepted his chilled beer. The world was restored. As we ate, I reflected. The day Fritz nearly died, Wolfe nearly admitted he cared. Nearly. I'll take what I can get. And after that, I'd be keeping an eye on Fritz, just in case the world decided to throw another brick.